We're joined now by the Finance Minister, Penny Wong. Senator Wong, good morning.
Good morning. This is an interesting and chilly environment.
It is a very chilly environment. There's a deficit of heating here, I can tell you that
much. There sure is.
Now, given all of the criticism the government has copped about those way out of whack forecasts to date, how can voters trust you when you say there'll be a surplus of $6 billion in 4 years?
Look, what we've done is a budget that is responsible, that lays out a pathway to surplus, and that deals with the economic circumstances we've been presented with, which is the largest write-down in revenue, that is tax money coming to government, for a very long time. In fact, it's the second largest since the Great Depression, $60 billion over the forward estimates from what we anticipated just 4 months ago. Now, those are the economic facts. I know that Joe Hockey and the opposition would like to pretend they don't exist or that someone's just made it up, but they are the economic facts. So what do you do when you're presented with that? Well, you do what the government's done. You make responsible savings for the long term, but you protect jobs and growth here in Australia through the forward estimates by making sure you keep the economy strong.
And looking at the budget, it strikes me, as it has struck a lot of people, that it's really a legacy budget. It's not your traditional pre-election budget laden with sweeteners to win votes. This is more about cutting and axing and not trying to win popularity.
Well, you know, it's interesting. One half of your question, I think, is right, that it's not your traditional pre-election budget. It's a budget that is very much about the long term. It's a budget that's very much about making sure you protect jobs and growth but make the savings that are required for the future, even if, they are politically difficult. But I think you're very wrong when you say that, we thought about legacy. You know what we thought about? We thought, how do we make sure we fund these important school reforms, lifting every classroom, making sure no child is left behind in the way that some are at the moment? How do we fund disability care? How do we make sure Australians with a disability in this country get the care and support they deserve? That's what we were thinking of when we put the budget together.
Let's look at some of the measures. That the baby bonus, the $5,000 baby dollar bonus has gone. It's been folded into, as I said, a much more modest family tax payment structure. What was guiding that decision?
Well, look, no savings measure that I've found is painless or is without criticism, and that's one. But ultimately, if you want to make room to fund something like the investment in our schools, you have to find savings within the budget. We put in place a paid parental leave scheme, so people do have access to that, and we have ensured that there is an increase in family tax benefit of a couple of $1,000s for your first child, paid over a period of time. So we are still assisting families on top of the other things we've done, which are things like, increases to the childcare rebate, very important a reform that the government's introduced.
But as the Treasurer pointed out in his media conference, this is going to be make a lot of prospective parents very, very unhappy. In fact, 28,000 families will now miss out on the baby bonus altogether.
And what I'd say is what families get in return for the savings we are asking them to make, just as we're asking for savings across the budget, is the knowledge that you will have a school program that resources every classroom. That means your child will not be left behind no matter which postcode you live in. I think that's a pretty important thing.
Now, looking at some of the budget measures, the mining tax, it was finally confirmed it would only raise $200 million this financial year, down from the forecast of $2 billion. That's just simply embarrassing, isn't it?
Well, look, this is a volatile tax. We've said that for some time, but I would make the point that what's occurring in the budget is not driven by the mining tax. I mean, that is a fraction of the revenue write-down. That is the reduction in money that government gets through tax that we've seen. And remember, even with all these changes that people are talking about, if you look at tax as a share of the economy, we are a much lower taxing government than Peter Costello, and that reflects what's happening in our economy with the high dollar and the terms of trade coming off, and how they're combining to put pressure on profits in our economy.
On the carbon price, more than halved from the initial forecast of $29 per tonne to $12 per tonne. Again, how did you get it so horribly wrong on that front as well?
Well, I do think it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Do you remember Tony Abbott when the carbon price first came in? He said it'll just go up and up and up, and this was an underestimate. It was going to be $40, $50. Well, what's occurred is, as you know, we have a fixed price period. We'll move to a floating price. Because of what's happening in the global economy, particularly what's happening in Europe. I mean, there is a recession in Europe, and that's going to affect prices. We've had to adjust down the carbon price. That's not actually a bad thing. We have had to make savings in the budget to offset that. But what it is actually meaning is that Australia can reduce its pollution for a lower economic cost. So, that's not a bad thing.
The savings include winding back some of the assistance to the energy industry. Surely they'll be unhappy about that this morning.
Well, I don't think anybody who thinks they were going to get something and then is not going to get it is happy. But the point we'd make is we're adjusting assistance in line with a lower carbon price.
A lot of measures in this budget. You've only got 18 sitting days left to go before the election. Do you intend to at least aim to legislate all of these budget changes?
Well, we've certainly got a very big legislative program, and we'll continue to press for that program and make sure we get as much through as always as we can in the sitting. What I would say though is really it's incumbent upon Tony Abbott in his budget reply tomorrow to say to Australians what he would do. And these are the facts. If you want a pathway back to surplus, such as the government's put down, you have to make decisions. And I would say, let's remember, we've had our AAA credit rating reaffirmed as a nation overnight on the back of the government's budget. That's a pretty good endorsement.
How confident are you you'll get support from, in the first instance, those key crossbenchers?
Well, I actually think the key is Tony Abbott. I mean, this is the man who wants to be Prime Minister. He says he wants, but if he wants to be, if he says, I want to be Prime Minister and I want to run a strong economy should I be elected, isn't the pressure on him to tell Australians what he would do? And if he doesn't agree with the government's cuts, what would he cut?
Do you really believe in your heart of hearts this is a budget that will help Labor win voters at the next election?
I believe in my heart of hearts this is absolutely the right budget for the nation. Absolutely. And ultimately the choice is in voters' hands, because just as budgets are about choices, so too are elections. They're about what sort of country do you want, what sort of future do you want. And we've made clear we want a future that has a smarter economy, more kids being brought up to the level we need all of our children to be, a fairer society, disability care, the next wave of Medicare, and ultimately a stronger economy, more jobs.
And we'll see what voters think about that in 4 months' time. Penny Wong, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good to speak with you.